When rescuers found the dying tiger cub abandoned in the ruins of an old temple, they never imagined he would end up forming an unbreakable bond with a pack of street dogs that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about interspecies relationships. What happened next would capture the hearts of millions and prove that family isn't always about blood. The monsoon rains had been relentless for 3 days in the remote village of Bandhavgarh, located on the outskirts of Madhya Pradesh's famous tiger reserve. Water cascaded down the ancient stone steps of the abandoned Shiva temple, creating streams that wound through the overgrown courtyard where weeds pushed through cracks in centuries-old foundations. It was here, in this forgotten sacred place, that a female Bengal tiger had sought shelter to give birth. The tigress had chosen this location carefully. The thick walls provided protection from the elements, and the remote location meant minimal human interference. In a small alcove behind the main shrine, she had delivered 4 cubs 3 weeks earlier. Their orange and black striped fur was beginning to show the distinctive patterns that would mark them as one of nature's most magnificent predators. But nature is rarely kind to the weak. The smallest of the 4 cubs had been born with a severe cleft palate, a genetic defect that made nursing nearly impossible. While his 3 siblings grew strong and playful, fighting over their mother's milk and tumbling around the stone floor, the runt struggled to feed. His tiny body remained fragile, his movements labored, and his pitiful mewling often went unanswered as his mother focused her attention on the cubs with the best chance of survival. The defect was more than cosmetic. The opening in the roof of his mouth connected to his nasal cavity, causing milk to flow into his airways when he attempted to nurse. This led to frequent choking, difficulty breathing, and constant respiratory infections. Each feeding became a battle for survival, and each day he fell further behind his littermates in size and strength. Tiger mothers, despite their fierce protective instincts, must make brutal calculations for survival. In the wild, resources are limited, and investing too much energy in a cub unlikely to survive could mean death for the entire litter. The tigress had already begun showing signs of the difficult decision that lay ahead. She spent less time grooming the weak cub and more time preparing her healthy offspring for the challenges they would soon face in the jungle. The crisis came on the 4th day of torrential rain. A territorial male tiger, drawn by the scent markers the tigress had left around the temple grounds, began prowling the perimeter. His deep, rumbling calls echoed through the stone corridors, each roar a death sentence for any cubs he might find. Male tigers are notorious for infanticide, killing cubs that aren't their own to bring females back into breeding condition and eliminate future competition for territory and prey. The tigress immediately recognized the mortal danger. Her maternal instincts kicked into overdrive as she began the desperate process of relocating her vulnerable litter to safety. Time was running out with each passing minute as the male's roars grew closer and more aggressive. She could hear his massive paws splashing through the flooded courtyard, systematically searching every corner of the ancient complex. Working with frantic efficiency, the tigress seized her strongest cub with the scruff of his neck and bounded through a gap in the temple wall toward a secondary den she had prepared in a dense thicket nearly a kilometer away. The rain made the journey treacherous, turning the ground into slippery mud and reducing visibility to mere meters, but maternal determination drove her forward through the hostile conditions. She made 3 successful trips, each time carrying one of her healthy cubs to safety while the storm provided cover for her movements. Each journey took precious minutes as she navigated fallen trees, swollen streams, and the ever-present threat of the prowling male. The relocated cubs huddled together in their new sanctuary, their frightened chirps barely audible above the pounding rain. When the tigress returned for her final cub, she found the weakest one lying motionless in the corner where she had left him. His breathing was shallow and labored, his small body racked with fever from the respiratory infection that had worsened during the stress of the territorial intrusion. The deformed cub looked up at his mother with glazed eyes, too weak to even lift his head properly. The male tiger's roar split the night air, now dangerously close to the temple entrance. The tigress faced an impossible choice that would haunt any human parent, but was tragically common in the unforgiving world of wild predators. Her survival instinct warred with her maternal bond as precious seconds ticked away. With one final, lingering look at her dying cub, the tigress turned and melted into the darkness, leaving him behind to save the three who had a chance at life. The abandoned cub was now alone in the world, too weak to call out and too small to survive the approaching storm. As dawn broke through the clearing storm clouds, the abandoned tiger cub lay motionless in the temple ruins, his breathing so shallow it barely stirred the matted fur on his tiny chest. The fever had worsened during the night, and dehydration was setting in rapidly. His small body had begun shutting down non-essential functions in a desperate attempt to conserve what little energy remained. 3 kilometers away, in the bustling streets of Bandhavgarh village, a pack of 7 street dogs had taken shelter under the collapsed roof of an old grain storage building. These weren't ordinary strays. They had formed a tight-knit family unit led by a large, battle-scarred female named locally as Rani by the villagers who occasionally threw them scraps. Her golden-brown coat bore the marks of countless fights for survival, and her intelligent amber eyes missed nothing in their territory. Rani had recently given birth to her 2nd litter of the year, but tragedy had struck when a speeding truck claimed 4 of her 5 puppies just days earlier. The sole survivor, a small female pup, clung to life, but was barely thriving despite her devoted care. The loss had left Rani in a state of heightened maternal anxiety, her body still producing milk for the puppies that would never return home, her instincts searching for outlets for her protective energy. The pack dynamics were complex but stable. Besides Rani, there was Kala, a black mixed-breed male who served as the group's scout and early warning system. Then came Balu, a massive mastiff crossbreed whose intimidating size made him the pack's enforcer. The group also included 3 younger dogs, 2 females and 1 male, who had been absorbed into the pack over the previous months after being abandoned or orphaned themselves. On this particular morning, as the village began to stir with the sounds of early market preparation, Kala caught an unusual scent carried on the wind. Years of survival had sharpened his senses to detect everything from approaching danger to potential food sources. But this smell was different, wild, feline, and tinged with the unmistakable odor of sickness and distress. The scent triggered something primal in the pack's collective consciousness. Street dogs, despite their domesticated ancestry, retain strong instincts about territorial boundaries and potential threats. A big cat near their territory should have meant immediate danger, but the weakness in the scent suggested something else entirely. A creature in desperate need rather than a predator on the hunt. Kala's alert posture and low whine caught Rani's attention immediately. She lifted her head from where she had been grooming her surviving pup, her maternal instincts already heightened and ready to respond to any stimulus that might affect her family's safety or survival. Rani followed Kala's lead through the winding village paths, her maternal instincts warring with caution as the wild scent grew stronger. The other pack members trailed behind at a respectful distance, understanding that their alpha female needed to investigate this anomaly personally. The morning mist still clung to the ancient stones as they approached the temple ruins, and the silence felt unnaturally heavy after the previous night's storm. When Rani first laid eyes on the dying tiger cub, her initial reaction was pure predatory alertness. Every fiber of her being recognized this as the offspring of her species' most dangerous natural enemy. Tigers had been known to kill dogs without hesitation, viewing them as either prey or competition. Her hackles rose instinctively, and a low growl rumbled in her chest as she circled the motionless form. But something extraordinary happened as she drew closer. The cub's labored breathing, barely audible mewling sounds, and the way his tiny body curled defensively triggered responses that overrode millions of years of evolutionary programming. The sight of his orange and black stripes, still faint and fuzzy with youth, somehow registered not as threat markers, but as the distinctive patterns that marked him as someone's baby, someone's lost child. Rani's own recent loss amplified these conflicting impulses. Her body was still producing milk meant for the puppies that would never return home. Her maternal hormones remained elevated, seeking an outlet for the protective energy that had nowhere to go. The tiger cub's size was remarkably similar to her own lost offspring, and his helpless condition spoke to every protective instinct she possessed. The decisive moment came when the cub lifted his head slightly and made a weak, plaintive cry, the universal sound of a baby calling for its mother. The sound was so similar to a puppy's distress call that it bypassed Rani's logical brain entirely and went straight to her heart. In that instant, species barriers dissolved, replaced by something far more powerful and fundamental. Against every law of nature and survival, Rani made a choice that would defy explanation. She approached the dying cub slowly, her body language shifting from aggressive to investigative to protective. She began to lick his matted fur, just as she would clean one of her own puppies, her rough tongue stimulating circulation and removing the grime that had accumulated during his abandonment. The warmth and attention seemed to revive something in the cub, and he responded with faint purring-like sounds that further convinced Rani's maternal brain that this was a creature worthy of her protection and care. Rani gently gripped the tiger cub by the loose skin at the back of his neck, the same way she would carry her own puppies, and began the careful journey back to the pack shelter. The cub hung limply in her jaws, too weak to struggle or protest, his tiny paws barely twitching as she navigated the uneven terrain. Kala and the other dogs followed in stunned silence, their pack instincts compelling them to trust their leader's unprecedented decision despite their obvious confusion. When they arrived at the grain storage shelter, the pack's reaction was a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Balu, the massive mastiff mix, approached cautiously and sniffed the strange newcomer, his expression puzzled but not aggressive. The younger pack members hung back, uncertain how to process this violation of everything they understood about natural order, but their respect for Rani's authority kept them from challenging her choice. Rani placed the tiger cub next to her surviving puppy, a small golden female, who immediately showed interest in the newcomer. The puppy, barely 3 weeks old herself, seemed to accept the striped stranger without question, nuzzling against him for warmth and companionship. Their size difference was minimal, and both shared the universal vulnerability of very young animals dependent on maternal care for survival. The integration process began almost immediately. Rani positioned herself so both babies could nurse, and remarkably, the tiger cub's cleft palate seemed less problematic when he was able to position himself differently than he had with his tiger mother. The angle and pressure were different enough that while feeding remained difficult, it was no longer impossible. His first successful meal in days brought visible relief to his tiny frame. The pack gradually accepted this strange addition to their family unit. Dogs, despite their wild ancestry, have been shaped by thousands of years of domestication to be remarkably adaptable to unusual social situations. Their natural pack mentality, combined with their learned tolerance for diversity within human communities, made them uniquely suited to accommodate an outsider. Within hours, the other dogs were taking turns watching over both young ones while Rani foraged for food. Kala became particularly protective, positioning himself as a sentinel whenever the baby slept. The younger pack members began treating the tiger cub as they would any pack offspring, grooming him gently and allowing him to sleep pressed against their warm bodies during the cool mountain nights. The tiger cub, whom the pack seemed to instinctively understand needed special care, began showing signs of improvement in his first week with his new family.
As weeks passed, the tiger cub grew stronger under Rani's devoted care and gradually began to exhibit behaviors that created a fascinating blend of canine and feline characteristics. The pack had unofficially named him Chota, meaning small one, a nickname that stuck as villagers began to notice the extraordinary family living in the abandoned grain building. His orange and black stripes became more pronounced as he matured, creating a striking contrast against the golden and brown coats of his adoptive siblings.
The hunting games that developed between Chota and his adoptive sister became legendary among the local villagers who occasionally glimpsed them playing. While she would chase sticks and practice the typical pouncing behaviors of young dogs, Chota displayed the stalking instincts of his tiger heritage. He would crouch low in the tall grass behind their shelter, his natural camouflage making him nearly invisible before exploding into motion to surprise his playmate in perfectly executed ambush attacks. Despite his feline heritage, Chota adapted remarkably well to pack behavior. He learned to follow Rani's lead during their daily foraging expeditions, walking in formation with the other dogs as they navigated the village streets in search of food scraps. Shopkeepers and residents grew accustomed to seeing the unusual procession, 6 dogs followed by one small tiger, all moving together with the synchronized purpose of a true family unit. The bond between Chota and Rani deepened beyond simple maternal care into something that transcended species entirely. He would groom her ears with his rough tongue, a behavior that seemed to bring her immense comfort. When she was tired from hunting or scavenging, he would curl up against her side, his purring providing a soothing vibration that helped her relax. The other pack members began seeking out this same comforting sound, often gathering around Chota during rest periods to enjoy the peaceful rumbling that no dog could produce. Local wildlife photographer Arjan Mehta began documenting this unprecedented interspecies family, capturing images that would eventually reach international conservation organizations and animal behavior researchers around the world. As Chota approached his 4th month with the pack, the inevitable challenges of his true nature began to surface in ways that even Rani's devoted care couldn't overcome. His size had increased dramatically, and while still smaller than a typical tiger cub his age due to his early malnutrition, he now stood nearly as tall as some of the adult dogs in the pack. His playful pounces, once endearing and harmless, now carried enough force to knock down his adoptive siblings even when he was trying to be gentle. The cleft palate that had nearly killed him as a newborn continued to create complications despite the pack's acceptance and care. While he had learned to eat solid food by tearing meat into smaller pieces and positioning it carefully in his mouth, the defect still caused frequent respiratory infections. These episodes would leave him listless and weak for days, requiring constant attention from Rani and causing visible stress throughout the pack. More concerning was Chota's growing need for larger prey and more substantial nutrition than the pack could provide through their usual scavenging activities. Tigers require significantly more protein and calories than dogs, and his dietary needs were becoming impossible to meet through village scraps and the occasional small game the pack could catch. His hunting instincts were becoming stronger and more focused, sometimes directed toward animals that the dogs considered neutral or even friendly. The pack dynamics also began to shift as Chota's natural dominance behaviors emerged. Tigers are solitary apex predators, and these instincts gradually began to conflict with the cooperative pack mentality that had sustained the group for so long. During feeding times, Chota's increasing aggression toward food resources created tension among pack members who had previously shared everything harmoniously. Local authorities and wildlife experts had become aware of the situation through Arjan's photographs and growing media attention. Dr. Priya Sharma, a wildlife veterinarian from the nearby tiger reserve, began making regular visits to assess Chota's health and development. Her examinations revealed that while the pack had done an extraordinary job keeping him alive and helping him grow, His congenital defect was worsening as he matured, and his dietary deficiencies were beginning to affect his bone development and overall health. The reality that had been unthinkable just months earlier began to crystallize. Chota was outgrowing his canine family in ways that threatened both his well-being and theirs. The magical period of interspecies harmony was approaching its natural limits, and difficult decisions lay ahead for everyone who had come to love this impossible family. Dr. Sharma worked closely with the Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve management to develop a solution that honored the extraordinary bond between Chota and his canine family while addressing his increasingly complex needs. After months of careful planning, they created
A unique rehabilitation program that would allow Chota to transition gradually to a specialized care facility while maintaining contact with Rani and the pack during the critical adjustment period. The separation process was heartbreaking to witness. When the transport team arrived to take Chota to the reserve's medical facility, Rani's distress was immediate and profound. She followed the vehicle for nearly a kilometer, calling out with a sound that seemed to bridge the gap between howl and roar. The other pack members joined her vigil, creating a chorus of mourning that echoed through the village streets and brought tears to the eyes of everyone who heard it. At the reserve, veterinary specialists performed corrective surgery on Chota's cleft palate, a procedure that had a high success rate in young tigers when performed by experienced surgeons. The operation was complex, requiring multiple stages and weeks of recovery, but it offered the possibility of normal feeding and breathing for the first time in his life. Throughout his hospitalization, Rani was allowed daily visits, during which she would lie beside his recovery enclosure, grooming him through the mesh and providing the emotional comfort that no human caregiver could offer. The breakthrough came when Chota's surgery proved successful and his breathing difficulties disappeared almost immediately. For the first time in his life, he could eat without choking, breathe without struggle, and engage in normal tiger vocalizations. His health improved rapidly, and his personality flourished in ways that amazed his caregivers. The combination of proper nutrition, medical care, and continued emotional support from his adoptive mother created optimal conditions for his development. Dr. Sharma's documentation of this case revolutionized approaches to wildlife rehabilitation worldwide. Her research paper, titled Interspecies Maternal Bonding as a Rehabilitation Tool, a case study in tiger conservation, became one of the most cited works in wildlife psychology. The success of Chota's rehabilitation program led to the development of similar programs across India, where domestic animals were trained to provide emotional support for orphaned wildlife during critical early development periods. The story captured international attention, inspiring documentary filmmakers, conservationists, and animal lovers around the globe. More importantly, it generated substantial funding for tiger conservation efforts and raised awareness about the complex emotional lives of both wild and domestic animals. Years later, Chota had grown into a magnificent Bengal tiger, weighing over 200 kilograms, his distinctive stripes now bold and defined against his powerful frame. The reserve had constructed a special enclosure adjacent to the village boundary, allowing him to maintain visual and vocal contact with his canine family while living in an environment suited to his size and needs. This innovative setup became a model for other wildlife facilities worldwide, demonstrating that rehabilitation didn't have to mean complete separation from emotional support systems. Rani, now graying around her muzzle, but still the undisputed leader of her pack, continued her daily visits to the fence line, where Chota would wait for her arrival each morning. Their reunions were extraordinary to witness. The massive tiger would produce deep, rumbling chuffs of recognition, while Rani would respond with excited whines and tail wags that seemed to transport both animals back to those early days when species meant nothing and love meant everything. The pack dynamics had evolved beautifully around this unusual arrangement. Rani's surviving puppy, now a full-grown dog herself, had taken over many of the pack's leadership responsibilities, allowing her aging mother to focus on her continued role as Chota's emotional anchor. The other pack members had integrated this routine into their daily lives, often accompanying Rani on her visits and seeming to take pride in their connection to the famous tiger. Chota's story became a cornerstone of the reserve's educational programs, attracting visitors from around the world who came to witness this living testament to the power of cross-species bonding. Children would press their faces against the viewing area, watching in wonder as a street dog and a Bengal tiger demonstrated that family bonds could transcend every boundary that nature had supposedly created. The research generated by this case study led to breakthrough discoveries about neuroplasticity in animal behavior and the role of early emotional experiences in shaping adult psychology across species lines. Universities began incorporating Chota's story into their animal behavior curricula, and veterinary schools developed new protocols for wildlife rehabilitation that emphasized emotional well-being alongside physical health.
Local communities experienced an economic transformation as ecotourism flourished around this unique attraction. Village residents who had once viewed stray dogs as nuisances began protecting and caring for the pack, understanding their role in this internationally celebrated conservation success story. Rani and her family became unofficial ambassadors for street dog welfare programs throughout India. The daily routine continued with remarkable consistency, proof that some bonds are simply unbreakable, regardless of size, species, or the passage of time. Today, nearly 5 years after that stormy night in the abandoned temple, visitors to the Bandhavgarh Reserve witness something that challenges everything we thought we knew about the natural world. At precisely 7 a.m. each morning, a massive Bengal tiger approaches the boundary fence of his enclosure, settles into a relaxed position, and waits. Within minutes, a golden-brown street dog appears on the other side, accompanied by her pack, and the two engage in a greeting ritual that has never varied in all these years. What makes this story even more remarkable is its continuing impact on conservation efforts worldwide. The Rani Protocol, named after Chota's adoptive mother, has been implemented in wildlife rehabilitation centers across 4 continents using domestic animals as emotional support systems for orphaned wildlife. The success rate for animal reintegration has increased by 340% in facilities that have adopted this approach. Chota has become a father himself, and his cubs are being raised with innovative techniques inspired by his own unconventional upbringing. Researchers are discovering that tigers with early cross-species socialization show increased adaptability and reduced stress responses, traits that prove invaluable for conservation breeding programs. But perhaps the most profound legacy of this story lies in its simplest truth, that love recognizes no boundaries, and that sometimes the most unexpected families create the strongest bonds. In a world often divided by differences, Rani and Chota remind us that compassion can bridge any gap when we open our hearts to possibilities beyond our understanding. Their story continues to unfold each day at sunrise, proving that some miracles don't end. They just keep growing stronger with time.
If this incredible true story touched your heart and opened your mind to the amazing possibilities that exist in our natural world, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring wildlife stories that will change how you see the world around you. Hit that notification bell so you never miss these extraordinary tales of survival, love, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all living beings.